Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Stream live each week, Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis, and I'm the President and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation. And I'm joined this morning with my brother. He's not here, but he is joining us remotely, Tommy Lewis. Tommy, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Tommy Lewis, President and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Doing well, Eric. Good morning to you.
Good morning, man. How's life?
Life is good, Eric. Life is good. As some of you may remember, we have our youngest son, Bryce, who's a student at North Carolina A&T down in Greensboro, North Carolina. Yesterday, we woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, jumped on the road, drove 7.5 hours, stopped a few times, and dropped his vehicle off at school, made a run to a restaurant, called an Uber to the airport, flew through Atlanta, and landed back in Cincinnati around 11:30 p.m. for the grand tour of cars, planes, trains, and everything else. And we're back this morning for Diversity Conversations.
Man, Tommy, you are all over the place, brother. You've got so much energy, man. Just putting energy out into the world. You got to get it all done, right?
Got to get it all done, Eric. And so that's only the tip of the iceberg, because we had to drop Bryce off, get him settled. He's running around today doing some testing because he's in biology pre-med. He wants to be a medical doctor, right? And so we got to get him set up today and tomorrow. And then on Monday, finally, the wife and I get a vacation, Eric. Get a vacation. So we're gonna take we're gonna head off to Italy, take a cruise from Italy to Barcelona, from Rome to Barcelona, and enjoy some time away as best as possible. I am, Eric, going to try to disconnect. Okay. There's a lot of things going on.
Right.
I'm going to try to disconnect. And the transportation folks said that we have excellent Wi-Fi and connectivity, and that's the last thing I wanted to hear. But we'll be involved, we'll be engaged, and stay connected. How about you, Eric?
Tommy, things are going well, man. I'm enjoying life. I'm enjoying my 4 children. Tonight, my wife, my youngest son, and my daughter are all going to the sneaker ball. I've been waiting on my invitation.
Yeah.
I said, all the young people going to the sneaker ball. My wife is one of the young people, you know. I didn't get my invitation. I got my outfit, though. I got it all out, pressed, ready to go. Not exactly. No, I didn't care anything about the sneaker ball. But I am it fills me with joy to see my wife hang out with her children and them be proud enough of their mom to want her to be out there with them. So that's a beautiful thing. Jillian and Judy went to the Delta's National Convention and had a ball. It's like a shot of life back into Judy, just to be able to hang with her children. And so I've been enjoying watching them try to pick out their outfits, get their hair did, and all those kind of things. So that's a beautiful thing. Still, you and I are still enjoying what we do, making a lot of headway and progress. But man, these are difficult times that we live in, Tommy. As we talk about the essential or critical diversity conversations that occurred over the last week, I'll start. This was not a conversation that I was a part of. I was just observing sort of a National Geographic news program sort of on Hurricane Katrina. And if you've not seen that, Tommy, I would strongly encourage you to view that. It's literally shocking to see this story now because we watched that in real time. And I remember watching all the news stories that were talking about how sort of aimless and out of control the poor people of New Orleans were, and blacks out there just looting for no good reason. In the midst of this hurricane disaster, they're out there looting and things. And Tommy, what we saw was, I remember when they said in the what's the dome called?
Superdome.
Yeah, the Superdome. They were talking about rapes were happening, violence, people getting mugged, no electricity and everything. And in reality, that wasn't really occurring.
Right.
And but everybody in there, many of the black, all they had a lot of time was a radio. So they were hearing these news stories on the radio and even passing them on to other people in the Superdome. Like, hey, watch out for the restrooms. I heard there's been some rapes. What? We didn't hear it from nobody in here. We didn't see it nowhere in here. We just heard it on the radio. And the other thing that I saw, Tommy, was I saw the quote unquote looting. I remember how it was depicted. But what I saw here were people that were thirsty, that were hungry, that were starving, that were in wet clothes because they've been trodden through sludge and everything else. Nobody's coming to save them. Helicopters are flying over them to pick up the rich people in the rich neighborhoods, and they're just leaving them. And so they were going into, so it's like an exploration, an adventure. So a lot of the young people were sort of going, hey, mom, I know you don't have medicine. I'm going to go into, Walgreens or CVS. I'm going to get something. And then they'll come back with a buggy and say, hey, I got us some water and I got us some food, some crackers. And I'm looking at that, Tommy, and I'm saying, wow. And the other thing I saw were a lot of these good old boys, man, that were out there just shooting. Because we made looting the big thing, it's surviving. That's really what it is. People trying to survive. But we're calling them looters, and nobody's going to tolerate it. So now these vigilantes are out here shooting people, and they said it was like squirrel hunting. They had them all on camera. We never saw them during the time. But now we see that there was all these good old boys, self-deputized, going around just shooting people that are coming out of stores with underwear and socks.
Yeah, we think about, thank you for sharing, Eric. And I know we have a wonderful guest with us today. But as you were sharing, I was thinking again about the R factor. E plus R equals O. So E is the event. We cannot control the event. And oftentimes we are not controlling the narrative about the event. Right. Fiction is more intriguing than fact. And so I would like to advise us and welcome our community. When we are hearing some narratives, it could be visual narratives such as the television, written narratives such as news and print and posts, that we suspend judgment because we don't know how our R response will actually be in any situation. And we can't control our response or reaction, right? So we get emotionally hijacked. And then the O is the outcome. I would say in this situation and many other situations, i.e. events, that the ultimate O outcome is trauma. Our humanity has been traumatized or desensitized. So if it's the so-called quote unquote looting, if it's the shooting, if it's whatever it is, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, a millennial later, we're traumatized about these events. Let us not forget that real people were living and dying in these events.
Right.
So that's what I take from your story that you're sharing about Katrina.
And I'm going to invite our guest, Arlene Rahn, to join me. And while she's joining us, you come on. As she's joining us, I'll tell one last story about the National Geographic special. And they had a young man, older gentleman that was one of the narrators. And he was dressed to the nines. He had his brim on. He had his two-piece. He had his handkerchief. He just looked great. He had his glasses on, and he was one of the narrators. But they showed him during Katrina, and he was out there, bald head halfway. He had two babies in his arm. He had a T-shirt on, and he was just out there in survival mode. And he just looked like another sort of ghetto Black person that they depict. And you see how any of us could have been in that disaster, Tommy, and in survival mode, and yet get stereotyped as nobody worth saving. Last thing, and I'd love to have your perspective as we transition. One guy that was out there, just a community person out there trying to save people, had the Black people on the roof, and no helicopter was stopping. So he said, let's take all the Black people off the roof and put all white people on the roof. And then the helicopter stopped immediately. And he just kind of proved the point. But it's just in desperate times, what kind of things will we do with what we're living through right now, Tommy? The work that the three of us do to help people to care about each other. And that's part of what you're going to talk about today is essential.
Wow. Well, thank you for having me. And actually, I do have a perspective on Katrina, the aftermath of Katrina. I have one daughter, and she graduated college in 2013, and she went into Teach for America. Mm-hmm. And she chose to go to New Orleans. Mm. And she was given the grade level that corresponded with the children. Many of the children had lived through Katrina. Mm. And the one story that really comes to mind whenever somebody says Katrina, and you were talking about trauma and it's intergenerational, this one young man was obsessed with time. His mother, he was in the house with his mother, and his mother was trying to save them and try to get someone to come help them, and no one came. And so the water's rising, and the mother says, I'm going to go to your grandmother's or somebody close. and she said, I'll be back by 10 or something like that. And he's just an 8-year-old, and he's looking at the clock and she never came. And so he had to go to the second floor, and somehow he had the wherewithal to get to the roof. Didn't know, I mean, young kid. And that's where they found him a couple days later. And so he's obsessed with time now. Don't tell this young man I'll be back in 10 minutes and don't show up, because he literally would have a breakdown in my daughter's classroom. And that was just one student. Many of the students had other trauma that they're going to continue to live with. And the school system had gone bankrupt before Katrina. And so imagine after Katrina, they did not have the resources to help these young people. Now these young people are adults, and who knows if they are, still in that traumatic phase. So that's the story I always remember when I hear someone talk about Katrina. And I do know the special that you're talking about. I take a keen interest in that story and the continuation of that story.
Right. Well, I'm going to have Arlene introduce herself. She is a phenomenal consultant, facilitator, presenter, keynote speaker. She's worked around the world. She's a statistician, a researcher, but an amazing human being. And we are honored to have you join us as our first in-studio guest, community. She's certainly here for you to ask questions as we go throughout this process. But as we always do, I want you to start by introducing yourself to our community. And I want you to sort of go back a ways and sort of, how you grew up and that kind of thing, and tell them sort of who are the people and what are the experiences that have made you who you are today.
Certainly. Well, there's one word that has come into our vernacular as consultants in this space, and that's belonging. And so I use that now as a way of introducing myself and sharing some of those key experiences. And when I have an opportunity to have a presentation, I have 3 or 4 pictures. And the first one is of me. I'm in 5th grade, okay? I was born in Philadelphia. My parents moved out to the suburbs. Who knows why? But I later found out that they were redlined. And so we lived in a part of town that was far below the economic level that my father, an engineer, could afford. But anyway, so I'm in my crushed blue velvet jacket,
We can see it.
It's 1969, right? And I got my bangs, right? Hair slicked back. I'm good. I'm good, right? And I just remember that time in my life. Every day we'd eat breakfast together. My parents were big about, we start the day together, we end the day together. You could be mad in between, but don't bring that to the table. And my mother would say this to me. She would have advice for each of. My advice was, Arlene, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And what she meant was, don't answer all the questions, especially not all the tough questions. Be a nice little girl. It's the 60s, right? Now I love math and science, and I was good at it too. Okay, and that's what she meant. She meant, calm down, bring it down a notch. And then my father would turn to me and say, "But Arlene, the Romans know you're not one of them."
Wow.
2, vital lessons. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. But Arlene, the Romans know you're not one of them. And so that was my first understanding of belonging, trying to belong, and then really understanding you can try as hard as you want, but you still don't belong, right?
And I want to interject. So I was over at my brother's house last night. He's got a young man that I coached when he was coming up through AAU basketball. He's now a professional basketball player, and he'll be going to Japan. And he's 6'9", 6'10". I mean, huge, handsome young man. But he was looking at Shedeur Sanders' story. And how he fell from maybe going in the first 5 players to the 5th round because they think he's too arrogant, and certainly his father is. And so he was just looking at that and saying, how am I supposed to operate? And he was feeling like completely constrained all the time, that if I somehow try to expose my full self, that's going to be too much for the others. And so I've got to sort of make myself smaller. He was just talking about how exhausting that feels.
Yeah, and that goes to that piece of authenticity. I love that authenticity came into the vernacular, and I use the acronym C.A.R.E. And A is authenticity, and we'll jump to the second letter. That's okay. But authenticity has to magnify or amplify, who you are in a way that helps you reach your goals, and in a way that shows your values. What do you value? Your authenticity should amplify your values, your principles, who you are at your core, and I know that that's what my father meant.
Right.
Is that the Romans know you're not one of them.
Right.
So they know that you're going to have, they know you have the answer.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Even if you don't share it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
They know you have the answer. Okay. And so how are you going to work within that, Arlene? He challenged me.
Right.
So my father went to MIT. He did graduate work there.
Wow.
And I was old enough to be his assistant. He deemed me his assistant.
Right.
I could only have that job if I learned how to use a slide ruler.
Right.
Okay. Because it was because he had a calculator and I wanted to touch that calculator.
Right.
He said you could only use a calculator if you know how to calculate. So I had to learn how to use a slide ruler. It was a couple of years after the story I was telling you. And so I learned from him how to use my intelligence, my intellect in a way. Now, every once in a while, hey, we just won't have it out.
Right.
Somebody will say something and I just can't let it go.
Yeah. What was he navigating at MIT?
Well, he went there as a graduate student.
Okay.
And it really was what he was navigating to get there. He had been working for GE, and he had been with GE for like from 1959 to 1964, and he was only good enough to be a draftsman.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
He was an engineer.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Something that was signed, that EEO, the president signed in. Right. All of a sudden, Arnold, we have an opportunity for you. Okay. Yeah. So then he became an engineer. And he helped design missiles for the in their space division. So so the first lunar landing module, he helped design the missiles to get it off the moon. And so it was what he was navigating at GE. And of course, he found out there was pay disparity. Right. And again, this is where Romans know you're not one of them, but it's how do you use that intelligence? He found a way for them to pay him without paying him.
Yep.
Send me to MIT.
Okay.
Send me to the Sloan Fellows program.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring something back for y'all.
I'm gonna bring something back for you. Exactly. And they said they didn't think you could get in.
Right.
Of course, he got in. Okay. And this is one time where it was good that they had never sent anyone before. So there were no majority people who had gone.
So we can cut you down to half of whatever they got.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he wasn't like jumping in line in front of. He wasn't taking anybody's place because there was no place. So that's how he used his. And then there were a few other African Americans, women, Jewish people who were also similarly ostracized at GE, and they all conspired and worked together. Okay. So that's how once he got to MIT, it was one wonderful thing that I enjoyed about MIT generally is that it is about what's between your ears.
Right. Horsepower.
It is.
Yeah. You can bring it or you don't.
Right. Exactly.
And if you can, that gets some modicum of respect.
Right. And one of the things that I learned watching him and that he told me to remember when I was there and I took with me, any number of people can get in. MIT is concerned about the fact that you get out.
Yes.
Yes.
Come on.
Will you matriculate?
Right.
Come on.
Okay.
And that's a question mark.
Okay. So that was my first lesson around belonging, and it served me well through my years at MIT. The next picture I put up, so I'm doing the corporate thing.
Right.
Now this is the 80s. Okay, I got shoulder pads out to here. I wouldn't even carry a chair. Okay.
Come on, Arlene.
Right.
I grew my hair out. I had the hair, the remnants of Farrah Fawcett hair. All right, that's the picture. Okay.
Oh, we got to see that.
You got to see that. All right.
Right.
So that's me. And I go in to my boss's office and I'm thinking, this is it.
Right.
At that point, I was an assistant director. I was one of the youngest assistant directors. I worked for the next generation of the phone company, a group called US West out in Denver, Colorado. And I was on one of these huge projects to help redesign the telephony network so that we could carry wireless and data. Mm-hmm. So I had to know, the technology and then had to look ahead. And I had friends from MIT who were working on things that we needed to integrate into the technology. So I knew this was my time.
Right.
I get the greatest feedback.
Right.
So I'm waiting for the number and I'm waiting for the title.
Right.
And my boss says, "Oh, well, thank you." And we had that lunch next week. I'm like, "Whoa, what happened?"
Right.
What happened? I became that little girl that my mother said I shouldn't be in class. And I said, wait a minute. Oh, wait. This is not over. This is not over. What about this? What about that? And this was the response. Oh, don't worry about all that right now.
Yep.
You're still newly married.
Come on.
You can still say that. And you're pregnant with your first child.
Oh, yeah.
You need to spend time with them.
We got to protect her.
You're pregnant with your first child. And your husband is up for a promotion. And I checked. And he's pretty much assured he's going to get it.
So you're good.
So I'm good.
What's that got to do?
So you're good.
That's shocking, right?
You're well placed.
Right.
Shocking.
Right.
Absolutely shocking. Yeah. Again, I thought I was belonging. I thought I belonged. I was contributing.
We're one team.
But, yeah, we're one team. Right? And in an instant, I realized I did not belong. I did not deserve the same treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
you navigated from that
to Cincinnati.
Okay.
Yeah. So part of the promotion that my first husband was receiving, entailed moving, and we ended up moving to Cincinnati. And I had a hard time getting over that situation. So I learned a lot about resilience.
Right.
Learned a lot about resilience because my work did not transfer here. His did. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
did you both work at the same company?
We worked at the same.
Oh,
Lord. It's a telephone company, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking back in Colorado.
Everybody's lots of people.
Lots of people, plenty of people. And there were plenty of people who were married working.
Right.
But I could not find another couple who had, been told,
been told that?
Wow. Hey, geez. One's getting treatment, we can't give the other one treatment. So yeah, anyway. But that's what brought me to Cincinnati in some respects.
I'm so curious about that whole situation. I can spend a whole show on that because my issue with men is that men struggle with successful women.
Yeah.
That husbands oftentimes struggle with successful wives. How sensitive was he to your situation?
In retrospect, he could have been more sensitive.
Yeah.
In retrospect, he did what he thought would be helpful, which was to, give me a lot of pep talks. So it's like, I'm not the one who needs a pep talk.
Right.
Not the answer, just the encouragement.
Right, exactly. And eventually I did get my career back on track, but I never regained the momentum that I had in the corporate space. So I just left.
Right.
I found he got 2 or 3 more promotions.
Right.
He's a senior exec. I left. I went to work one day driving that little girl that I was pregnant with. She was at about 3.5, 4 years old.
Right.
We're in the car and I picked up my mother from the airport and I'm telling my mother's housework and I'm talking. And then she kicks the back of my seat. She says, "Mom, sounds like that man's trying to trick you into trouble."
Wow.
Okay.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Yes. And I said, okay. And my mother says, "Okay, baby, what should she do?" She said, "Well, I think she should pray."
Okay, Lord.
Okay. Meaning, you don't have to be religious and you don't have to be faith-filled, but what she was saying is out of your hands. You are trying to change something and change someone who's just not going to change, right? So, and then the next thing she said, like a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old would, is, "Are we going to get ice cream now the grandma's here?" She was on to the next.
Right.
On to the next.
And that gave me such freedom.
Yeah.
That gave me such freedom, because at one point I thought I was doing this for my daughter. I needed to be the strong woman for my daughter, but I didn't. She saw what was going on and how it was impacting me.
Mm-hmm.
So I get a call a couple weeks later after I left from Janet Reed, Dr. Janet Reed, and she said, "I have a client. I don't know if it was a client yet, but who wants to study why do people like us leave." Why do very well educated, because by then I had an MBA, okay, and of course Dr. Janet Reed, she's got a PhD, she had an illustrious career at Procter & Gamble. Why do people like us leave? Why do we leave? She said, "Would you come to a meeting with me?" I said, "Sure, I'll come to a meeting." So I go to a meeting, and of course there were people who did not look like us across the table, okay, and one person talked a lot. His name was John. I was my first time meeting
Pepper.
him. It was my first time meeting him. So don't get me.
Right.
Don't.
Right.
It was,
Right.
and he said, really, we want to struggle, because we invest so much. I said, listen, I think you're asking the wrong question.
Right.
I'm going to go back to my days as a researcher, at MIT. If I had a system and the system produced a result, okay, a specific result, but then I saw these outliers. I'm not going to redesign. I'm not going to study the outliers until I know how the system behaves. I said, so the question is not, why do people like me leave? The question is, why do people like all of you stay?
And that question was pertinent to him because he was struggling with Lloyd Ward leaving.
He was struggling
a couple of times.
Yeah.
He tried to keep him, but.
Yep. And of course, Janet was a little bit nervous about my being so direct.
Right.
But that turned the conversation. That pivoted the conversation.
Wow.
We got the work, and from there, I started to feel like I belonged where in the work that I was doing.
Right.
So we launched a culture audit for Procter and Gamble. Then they wanted us to validate the results with other corporations. We started that work back in 2002.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
2001, 2002.
Civil unrest had just happened here.
You got that.
Yep. Right.
And then we validated it, and then said, well, we need even further validation. You need to take this further. And so we created a national study. Okay. And we recruited a panel, like 8,000 people across all demographics. And it was underwritten by a grant from the National Urban League, several other major corporations. I mean, this was a $3 million study, which was a lot of money back then for this type of work.
Right.
And it was published by the National Urban League.
Yep. I remember that.
Yep.
Let me ask you this. And we want to get to the point that you're talking about. It's so interesting, right, Tommy? It's so interesting. Let me ask you this. Is that study as relevant today as it was when you were on there?
Absolutely. We just passed the 20-year mark for that study, and I posted it online with, a page around the critical results. Absolutely. Absolutely. When people feel valued and appreciated. And I remember hearing those words in the interviews. And we did hundreds of interviews. When people feel valued and appreciated, they said, that's all I want. I want to feel valued and appreciated for the contributions I make. That's what they want. When people feel valued and appreciated, they believe I believe that you will act in my best interest. Right. And they believe a couple of things that they probably shouldn't. Like one, they believe they're paid fairly. Right. Even if they're not. Okay. When they're valued and appreciated. I think that's what we're seeing now in this country. If I could segue to what I see or how I interpret, some of the pull towards people and opinions on the right side of the political spectrum. Right. We have people who did not feel valued or appreciated. That's it.
Right.
That is it. They didn't feel valued for the contributions that they were making to, maybe they did in their own immediate community, but not for who they were maybe as Americans more broadly. They didn't feel that value and appreciation. And certainly I know that feeling, and you may know that, we may know that feeling, but we have to appreciate that other people who don't look like us have been feeling that way for a very long time. Okay. And so then when somebody comes along, they're apt to believe, all right.
You say, I've gotten the short end of the stick. Nobody cares about me.
And then somebody comes along and says, I care about you. I care about you. I care about you. And they say it in a way that you can hear it and you begin to feel it. So you begin to believe other things. You believe that you are now going to be treated fairly by that person. You believe now that that you are, a contributing member, that it's the fault of somebody else before. I mean, you start believing a whole lot of things. I mean, I found out so much doing that research. See, I delved into some psychology and some other areas to help me interpret and understand what really came out of that.
Tommy, what questions do you have for Arlene? Because we could go, and neither one of us would ask a question because her life stories and the way in which she sort of charismatically delivers that is really powerful.
So fascinating conversation. And Arlene, you talked about earlier where around your sense of belonging, picture of parents, you even have a picture of you as far as confirming and validating your own thought around belonging. And my question is around, in this energy and spirit of being free, whatever that looks like for you, because Eric and I believe that we're free, right? In that spirit of freedom, how do you balance that spirit of freedom with the when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Ooh.
So in other words, I'm a free person, free thinker, but I work for a company and I'm trying to do what the company is expecting me to do. But your father said it correct. The Romans will let you know that you're not Roman.
Right.
How do you balance your freedom with wanting to really belong?
Oh, wow. And I do get asked that question. And most times it's within the context of a person's situation. So I'm going to have to say context matters.
Yes.
Context matters in that situation. And I'll give you an example, actually 2 fresh examples. I was working with a longtime friend and longtime professional associate who is a chief diversity officer, okay, at a major corporation that is in the news a lot these days. And he was really taking it on. He took on the mantle. And even though in the press they were getting beaten up, and even in, within our circles, within our profession, oh, they've backed away. But here's a man who I know had increased his staff by 30% since 2023, since he started there.
Right.
So that's not backing away. Somehow he
Right.
found a way to do it. Okay. He found a way to bring other C-level officers into the work, at least internally, even if they didn't do it publicly, internally,
Right.
they were showing up, okay, for his ERGs. This is a global organization, tens of thousands of people working for them. And finally, it just got to be too much. It got to be too much.
Yeah.
He's African American.
Yeah.
He's gay. He's married to a man, and he's like, listen, I can only take so much. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And so context matters. Did he have a record of accomplishment that he could stand on? Absolutely. Right. Now, if he had not had that record of accomplishment, and if he had asked me, I would have said, maybe let's see how we can, keep you whole internally,
Right.
while you continue to build that platform. Because that platform is not just important to you,
Right.
it's important to the people that you're leaving behind.
That's right. That's
Okay?
right. And if you're not there, it's unlikely to be
It's
done.
exactly.
Right.
And I think that's where I say context matters. How many people are working with you on your side within the organization and within the situation? Right? Because it can't be just about you.
Right.
When you sign up to work in an organization,
Right.
all right? Now, you're relatively independent.
Right.
I'm relatively independent.
Right.
You're relatively independent,
Right.
my friend. Okay,
Right.
all right. But when you're in an organization,
Be suffocated.
yeah.
Right.
So I say context matters.
Mhm.
Now, the other person, okay, she is in a situation, she's at a very well-known global financial services company. And her context is, I'm early enough in my career, I can go someplace else.
Right.
Yeah.
So Arlene, help me. I said, girl, whenever you got to fix your face, call me. Okay.
Right.
I said, I'll be there. I said, if it comes to that, I said, but you've got to show up right until you move
Right.
to the next.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Regardless of what they throw at you.
Mhm.
Okay. You accept it with grace.
Mhm.
Okay. And just know that there are bigger things waiting for you
That's good.
if you can be patient.
That's good.
Right. And so context matters. It
Right.
really does.
What I'd like to do, Tommy, is I'm going to bring up some information that Arlene has prepared that talks about we build relationships with care. And I've got your points here. I don't know if you want to say something about this to our community, and community, if you have any questions, certainly feel free to weigh in.
This is the core of my philosophy, and it really didn't come together until over these last 3 years, and I'll share a little bit more why. Another personal situation that led me to deepen my understanding of what relationships should be, how I should be building relationships, and that last letter in CARE stands for empathy. How empathy can be truly transformational. So if you want to go ahead and bring them up, yeah.
And so we'll start with the first one.
Right. Curiosity. CARE begins with C, curiosity over assumptions. And this is where we need to lean in and ask people questions, just like the example I was giving, about people who may have a different political view than we do. Lean in, ask questions, curiosity over assumptions, right? And I try not to use too many buzzwords, right? But sometimes, when we have preconceived understandings or notions, that's called bias, right?
Right.
And so that says we're looking at the world through our lens. We need to see the world through the lens of someone else. So curiosity over assumptions. All right. So that's where we begin. And then leverage your authenticity as a strength. Right. Understand what it is. Right. But your authenticity should help you show up with purpose. Right. Not distraction.
Right.
All right. We got to the point where authenticity was the objective. It was like, no. No, purple lipstick. No, that's not. Fine. But it should. Your authenticity should show up with a purpose.
I like that.
It should amplify. All right, and your authenticity. Oftentimes, what people don't realize is when they're busy being authentic, they are crossing their boundaries.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Then how do you rein that in?
Right.
And then they're crossing somebody else's boundaries too.
Right.
How do you rein that in?
Right. Tommy, our guest last week, Charlotte Otter from Germany, was talking about this, and she was really encouraging. She's written this book, We Need New Leaders. And she interviewed 40 sort of diverse people around their life stories. And one of the things that she was talking about is being your authentic self. And there was a part of me that was saying, like, well, marginalized people would say, well, that sometimes it's difficult to show up being my authentic self but you know what? Her point was almost, and I don't think she had seen it as clearly until we discussed it. She was saying authenticity is about the long run. It's not even about today with these people. That if these people don't buy me, then that probably means this is the wrong place. Be my authentic self, the genuine part of that. And that prepares me. As I do that, I prepare myself to find the right place for me to exist.
And Eric, Arlene, I would agree with you as well. I believe that authenticity is absolutely a strength as well as a psychological necessity.
Absolutely.
Because if you're showing up as someone else, as a representative of your true self, it only takes, from a sociological perspective and a psychological perspective, it only takes a matter of time before that false identity becomes your reality.
Absolutely.
And so some of us get lost in presenting ourselves in ways that are palatable to other people. We find that in our own homes when the individual woman or the individual man, who are individuals before they come together, and then they lose themselves in the marriage, right?
That's crossing and losing respect.
It's that individual professional that goes into the workplace, their organization, and they lose themselves as being Roman, and they're not Roman. They lose themselves as being the company itself instead of a professional, an employee of the company. So when over time, after we have masqueraded as someone else, there is a psychology around imposter syndrome. There's a psychology around deficit model thinking and all of that. And unfortunately, that negative thinking creates trauma in and of itself, that it's difficult for us to be our authentic selves. As I heard in close here, I saw in the chat room where one of the commenters, Eunice, says, Arlene's always direct, referring to our guest, Arlene, right?
Eunice, I like Eunice. I've known Eunice for almost 30 years.
Eunice says if Arlene is not direct, she is not her. She's not authentic, right? So there's an expectation of Arlene's directness, not being mean, not being abrasive, not being disrespectful, but just being direct. And as Arlene is authentically direct, she sets the expectation for people around her, right? Particularly when it's couched with love. This is being direct because I love you, not being direct because I want to tear you down. Again, authenticity is the freeing remedy, right? It is the recipe to be free. Because we can only truly be ourselves, and it hurts us to try to be someone else.
Oh, it does.
And I'm going to move to the R, but I just want to reiterate what you said there in the second sentence, because you said sometimes, okay, show up with clarity and purpose, but then you said express your true self without crossing boundaries or losing respect for others. And I think that's I've made mistakes. So sometimes being authentic when I step over a boundary,
Yeah.
then I have to sometimes say, whoa,
Mhm.
I went too far.
Mhm.
And I now have to apologize.
Yeah.
And make adjustments. So this is not about me getting up every day saying, I'm going to take my full true self to the workplace and everybody's got to take it or leave it.
Yeah.
You know, because that just doesn't work and it's not actually healthy.
Yeah.
The R.
The R, respect. Respect is a daily practice. And it begins with listening, right, to others and being accountable. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Being I hold myself accountable to the belief that everyone, right, has the potential to contribute value.
Mm.
Now, they may not choose to,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can make another choice. But I have to have this belief that everyone has the potential to contribute value.
Right.
Right. That's part of my authenticity.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Right. Now I'll call you out.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I'll call you out if you don't use resources wisely.
Right.
My
Right.
attention included.
Right. Right.
Okay. But still, I still hold to that belief, and every day. But when I talk about respect in a fuller sense, I've also learned, because you had said in your introduction, I've done this work on the ground, not in virtual reality,
Right.
on the ground in I think now something like 27 countries, face to face. Face to face with people in places like Sri Lanka, or face to face in Singapore, or face to face in Shanghai. So face to face, and so we have to understand that respect is communicated very differently in different cultures. Okay. All right. Now, here's the fun part. I love doing this. So we have two children, okay, about the age of 4 or 5, like my daughter when she said, trick into trouble. Okay. We have two children. All right. They're playing in a room and there's no adult present, and they're doing what kids do, pulling toys and books out and whatnot.
Right.
An adult that both the children know, okay, and respect and admire, the adult comes in and says, clean the room. Just a statement. Clean the room. Child A looks at this adult and says, "No, I don't want to." Okay, because they're 4 or 5. Right.
This is the fun part.
Right. This is the fun part. Then the adult leaves, and child A begins to clean up the room. Remember, there's another child there.
Right.
Child B, upon hearing "clean the room," child B nods in agreement and says, "Yes." Okay. The adult leaves. Child B does not clean up the room.
Okay.
Okay. Now I saw your response, and I think I saw your response. Right. We each have a very, very clear gut level response, to these children. One is deemed acting out, or being bad, or needing correction, and the other child may be deemed as, okay, that's all right, we can work with that a little bit. So child A, okay, is learning that respect is not what you say, it's what you do.
Yeah.
Right.
Because after all, the measure of a good man or a woman is in how they perform and in their actions. Because actions speak louder than words.
Right.
Yes.
And after all is well that ends well.
Arlene, let me ask you to consider this, or share this with myself, Eric, and our community. Respect is a daily practice.
Yeah.
I get it, right? We must consistently listen, act, and hold space for perspectives beyond our own. What coaching, advice, counseling, direction might you give to someone who has listened to themselves and not realize that what they're telling themselves is hurtful or harmful to others by way of their behavior? In other words, the racist, the bigot, the homophobe, they may be listening to themselves daily saying, those other people are absolutely appalling, right? And so my speech is going to be hurtful. My behavior is going to be hurtful. My attitude, my energy, my spirit is going to be hurtful. But for me, it's good thinking because I respect myself. How do we help others who may very well daily practice respect for themselves and their tribe, and completely disrespecting and offending others?
Yeah. That's a process. I think we have to, or when I have been in those situations, now I've been in every power plant in the state of Kentucky. I've been in every steel mill in this country, save one.
Right.
Okay. So I've been deep in manufacturing, in remote places, right? I've been out on oil rigs. I've been in the oil fields down in Texas. And so you're sharing something that is very familiar to me, right? You're sharing a perspective and a behavior that's very familiar to me. And this is where I try to lean in, and I try to go back to the first C,
Curiosity.
Curiosity, how can I frame questions that would
right.
help
Right.
reshape
Right.
this person's
Right.
behavior. It's their behavior around respect.
Right.
Because that example that I was giving you were the behaviors that we
Right.
exhibit around
Right.
respect.
Right.
Right. So child A, well, if it ends well, that's fine. Well, he's going to do the work anyway. That's fine. All's well that ends well. I can keep mine fused. He's going to do the work, even though I think he's an abomination.
Right.
Right. All's well that ends well. But then, there are other interpretations of respect. And so, so how do we ask someone questions in a way that gets to that underlying value? And how do you want to live that value? Because and sometimes I'll try to discover if the person is a faith-based person. That can be helpful to understand what their faith is, whether they're Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Jewish. It doesn't matter. What, do you have a faith foundation that helps you better understand, or even if they don't have a faith,
right.
Right. Because most people that I've encountered, especially in the workplace, okay, and I work with people in the workplace, all right, so especially in the workplace, they do not want to. Most people I've worked with do not want to be thought of in a negative way. Okay, they may say they don't care, right? They may say that, but that may not really be where their heart is, right? You can think of me in a neutral way. That's fine, right? You may not want to go out to lunch, bowling team and all that kind of stuff. We're not going to go hunting together, certainly not. But they may not want to be thought of in a negative way, and so getting them to. So it's a process. It's absolutely a process. And that process begins with curiosity. So how do you feel when you're with your own people who are, how does that feel? And then the other thing is that when we delve more deeply into identity, and this is the part of authenticity that we forget about, our identity, we use the identity wheel, the diversity wheel. Right. I don't wake up every day and say, oh, I'm a Black woman of a certain age. Oh, no, some days I do. Yeah. Okay. But most days, what do? I wake up. What were we talking about before the mics went on? We were talking about our kids. Right. What is most important to your identity, right? And so oftentimes it's family. Oftentimes it's maybe it is something, like for me, it's about my health. Right. We talked about that earlier. It's about so I'm in year 3 of battling cancer, right? So I never woke up and thought about my health until 3 years ago. Right. Cancer is completely asymptomatic. Right. You don't have to think about it until one day someone says you have cancer, and it's not a good kind.
Now it's top of mind.
Let me jump in here. Yeah. Sometimes Tommy and I sort of take a time out and slow down the picture frame.
Yeah, sure.
And I want to speak to our community right now, those people that are watching right now, or those people that may watch this in the future, that are looking at Arlene and thinking, man, I'd love to be a consultant like her. I am sitting here and I'm watching you, and I'm not just listening to your words, but because she's in the studio, I'm actually seeing your deep expressions. When you answer questions, it's almost as if you are seeing what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Now, a lot of people might be able to come up with the acronym CARE, but it's a whole different thing to live out the values and the principles that you're teaching. She's not just a consultant that studied how to be a consultant. She's a wise, integrity-centered leader that is believing the things that she's teaching. And I'm going to tell you that a lot of people that do the work that you, I, and Tommy do, they don't really want to be curious about other people who see things differently. They don't want that respect, which means listening. I mean, that's right where you went to. When Tommy asked you the question, your eyes went right to, how do I see this person and how do I respect them? And then we're going to get to I'm going to bring up this last thing. So I just wanted to mention that because that's so powerful to see that you're not just a theoretical consultant, but you're one who has the integrity to try to live by the values that you're talking about. And then you talked about the battle that you've had with cancer, and to see you here with such joy and laughter and hopefulness and optimism. You say empathy is transformational. Maybe you can close us out by sort of tying those together.
Sure. So just picking up on that conversation about respect, trying to walk beside someone,
Yeah.
right, in their life and their worldview. I talked, about those two children. Well, the child on the other side, their worldview is being shaped maybe by parents who say, respect your elders, okay? Or what my mother used to say, a hard head makes a soft behind, okay? Because we raised in the 60s and children could have been, swatted on the backside, but there was some pain involved, not physical pain all the time, but there was some pain involved in not respecting your elders. Or what I learned when I worked in Japan, was working on a project between the U.S. and Japan. They said, Arlene, the Japanese, we don't know what they're thinking. And then someone piped in and says, Arlene, the loudest duck gets shot first.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. And so when you really get into the person's definition of respect and walk beside them, then maybe share another view. Okay. You've created an opportunity for growth. Okay. And that is the first step towards empathy, right? And empathy can be truly transformational. And I say it's built on civility. And I know there's a lot of work now around civility, and I can talk about civility. Sometimes I'm asked to, but it's this compassion to really see through the other person's perspective. Now, you asked me before we went on air, do I talk much about my cancer? And I said, I haven't until recently, right? Because I was observing it. One, I didn't know, how I wanted to process it. I hadn't gotten to the place where my oncologist says, okay, I think you're in remission, right? And so I hadn't gotten the green stamp that I didn't need. So I had major surgery each of 3 years. I mean, major surgery, 3 years in a row. I had medications fail or produce horrendous results. That's a failure. So I had to try another one. So I'm finally on a stable course. So until I understood where I was, and that's the same thing. Sometimes people just really don't understand where they are, in terms of how their opinions or perspectives are impacting the people around them. And so this empathy piece is really about trying to understand the other from the other's perspective. Okay. And when you can do that, and sometimes if there's someone who's, we might call a difficult person in terms of, or a different person in terms of their views, if enough people express respect and empathy for that person can begin to change and see themselves differently, and at least maybe change their behaviors. At least while I'm here at work, I'm going to be more accepting. I'm going to dial down the rhetoric. I'm going to, right? And so that's what I mean by empathy is transformational, right? Is that when you're willing to be inside with someone else, just sit beside them, it can transform you, them, and the relationship.
So let me jump in as we wind down. We're over time now because it's been so powerful. Don't worry about it. That's the power of us doing our own thing.
Wow.
We can go into overtime. I want to sort of tie back something. First of all, I think CARE is powerful. So I want to thank you for what you've created here, because I would say to you that in part you're saying to us as individuals, as a nation, and as the world, that we got to care more about each other.
Absolutely.
I would also say that you talked about your father creating rockets. That's really what he did. And I would say maybe one of the most powerful rockets that he ever created was you.
Oh, that's so kind.
Because I see the energy that you have. I mean, this is powerful. I mean, you're literally filling up this room with this belief that we have to care about each other. And I love seeing that in you. I love somebody who believes what they're teaching and what they're saying. And I see you as just a powerful force for good in a world that is in desperate need of that. So thank you for that message. Tommy, we haven't even scratched the surface. I'm pitching it to you, Tommy. We're going to pitch it back to you to sort of say one last thing, and then we're out. Go,
yeah,
Tommy.
It's absolutely a pleasure to meet, speak, and learn from Miss Arlene Rahn. I think that we all need to care, not just as an acronym, but as a behavior, as an actionable item. I think that it can be difficult at times to care, but caring like love, the more you do, the more you seem to have. The more you do love, the more abundantly loving you are. The more you care, the more you feel like caring, such that I don't care is not in your vernacular. Miss Arlene taught us this today. And this diversity conversation is shifting our perspective of how we see ourselves and see one another. Care about ourselves, care about one another, and care about the generations that are not even born yet.
Absolutely.
That's what we're trying to do. So I want to say thank you. for allowing me to be privileged to be in the space to learn once again. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Arlene, for final words.
Well, there's not much more I can say other than thank you, gentlemen, for inviting me into your space, your place, your home, your hearts, your community. It's been a wonderful experience for me, and I hope that we can continue the conversation.
Absolutely. This has been powerful. Arlene, what Tommy and I have said, we've been doing this for 7 years now. How many episodes, Tommy?
Nearly 360 episodes.
Right. And so I'm going to say two things to you. Number one, Tommy and I have said that if nobody else in the world ever saw diversity conversations, we would still do it because of the joy that we have with each other.
Yeah.
But then God also showed me that what we're doing here is we are providing part of our legacy, an oral record of our lives, so that our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren will be able to look back and see what Tommy and I thought about a whole host of topics, but also get the opportunity and the honor to see the people who we respected and valued and the messages that they had to deliver. So I'm so grateful that this session is going to deliver a message to our children, and there's nobody anywhere that can stop that or shut that down. This has already been stamped. And we're grateful to have you part of this. I do think you need a podcast. You are just blowing through the screen. I think you really are beautiful, but beauty that we ultimately have, it comes from what's inside of us. And then it sort of emanates out into the world. And so, community, we want to thank you for joining us today. And we want to invite you back next week for another installment of